Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'll be talking about the concept of slavery in Islam, which has been very much unfortunately abused and taken out of context. So the Quran itself is a divine revelation, as we know. First one, practice pondering about the verses in the Quran. In Surah Muhammad, chapter 47, verse 24, actually it clearly states, don't they ponder about the Quranic verses or about the Quran, or their hearts have been sealed. So now the question is, how do we ponder about the Quran? The Quran orders the Prophet of Islam to practice or to do tartil. Tartil, often understood by the majority of people, is to make some nice sounds when reciting the Quran. But actually tartil, from a linguistic standpoint, means you group the verses which have a common theme. And after grouping those verses to have a common theme of the verse that is under discussion, then you will see an image emerge of the closest meaning that you would actually arrive at. They say that Islam condones slavery. And to prove that, they say that Islam throughout history have practiced slavery. So we see the history been written by various political entities throughout history, from the Umayyad era, the Abbasid era, and so on and so forth. Yes, we do find evidence in these eras that slavery was practiced, but was it according to the Quranic teachings or the prophetic teachings? The answer is absolutely not. And that is something I discovered when examining these verses, which are basically under question in reference to slavery. I could not find any evidence, and that's something I could challenge anyone, actually, anyone, whether you're a scholar or not a scholar, to give me evidence that the Quran condones slavery. And I will discuss this issue in details, and namely the reference they make to slavery, that is the term used in the Quran, your right hand possess. And this particular verse, or that particular segment, appears about 7 to 8 verses throughout the Quran. And that particular segment of the verse, of these 7 or 8 verses, it's translated to be, unfortunately in English, to be the captives of war. And that's it, they say. And unfortunately, this is not the case. If you look at the term or the terminologies of this particular statement, you would easily see that it is absolutely away from condoning slavery. Now, the idea is in here that if we take, let's say, verse An-Nisa chapter 4, verse 24, it begins by saying, and in the brackets, forbidden to you, married woman, except those whom your right hands possess. Now, the translation, if you take any translation, they would usually define the right hand possess here as the captive woman or the slaves. Now, they say, according to these verses where this phrase occurs, they say this is a legislation to allow the master of these slave females, to make them as a sexual slave. And that is absolutely unacceptable. Not only unacceptable because I say so, because the verse does not say so. So how do we understand this phrase, your right hand possess? Now, just to give you a historic background of this phrase before the revelation of the Quran, I could not find any evidence whatsoever that this particular phrase, right hand possess or mulk al-yamin, existed before Islam. This is something, a new terminology the Quran employs. And the beauty about this, that this gives us a wide umbrella under which this category, there's a lot of category of people goes under this umbrella. That is, namely, the vulnerable of society. And those people whom they would become under our authorities, under people's authorities, for many reasons. There could be conflicts of wars, poverty, or due to the death of parents or guardians. There will be some segment of society become very vulnerable, unprotected, and they need some guardians or some people to protect them. We often translate this as the right hand in the physical sense. Actually, it's not. From a Quranic standpoint, based on the linguistic of the right and the word hand, or the right, which is yameen, in this particular segment, right hand possess, it talks about oath. And to prove my point, but basically what the verse is saying, when you take these vulnerables under oath of a protection, providing security for them, and this one clearly stated at Tawbah verse 12, and they break their oaths, not underlined under this particular word, they break their oaths. In the Arabic context, the word used aymanuhum. So compare this to the verse of the slavery, what they say, right hand possess. They translate it as aymanuhum, in that right hand possess, into right as aymanuhum as a right hand. But in this particular verse, it translated as being oath. The exact word, aymanuhum, aymanuhum there. So what does that mean? It means that Allah is telling us, if you possess or you take under your protection under oath, when you take somebody to protect as a vulnerable under oath, what is oath here? Is the law of the land, the divine law as well. Any law that is honored, respected by society, it's considered to be oath. So basically what's telling us, whatever you possess, you take to your possession under oath. What is the oath dictates to you is to protect, to honor, to provide for them, their sustenance, and so on, until they are able to be by their own. Let's imagine that Islam would say prohibit to you slavery. What that means, the slave will remain slave under the authority of his master, because with the non-Muslim master, because Muslims are not allowed to deal with them. But what Islam offered is to try to deal, administrate, and also to slowly eradicate slavery. Because when you have, Islam tells a Muslim, if you make a mistake, let's say there are some verses in the Quran, provide a moral freedom to the slaves. For example, if you make a sin, one way to basically try to ask for forgiveness, the Quran says, go find a slave from the non-Muslims, of course, and free them. That's one way of freeing the slaves. And many other verses in the Quran were designed to actually grab the slaves from the hands of the unbelievers and give them their freedom. So surely, slowly but surely, Islam provided a gate to free slaves. And well, unfortunately, in recent history, they credit, I think Lincoln, of one of the American presidents in the early 19th century or late 18th century, who they credit the ending of slavery to him. I say, no, it's really Islam has brought slavery to an end. But not the Muslims, unfortunately, throughout the Umayyad and the Abbasid and so on. They continued the same trend as before Islam, because what happened is they reverted back to the state before Islam. Again is the Quran teachings, and again is the prophets and the various imams of the Muslims. And that is, I think, basically, in summary, of slavery is not condoned by Islam nor by the Quran. There is no evidence of it. Any evidence has been used is basically taken out of context. And I challenge anyone to try to tell me these verses, which is 7 or 8 of them, which employ the term right hand possess. Even the translation is even wrong. So the right hand possess basically does not refer to a slave woman as often being translated. Rather, it refers to the vulnerable of society, which has many types, as I explained. Inshallah, we will continue on these controversial verses. Thank you very much. May God bless.